In August 1987, Cora Valdez vanished from Mel's Diner, 8 months pregnant, scared, and seen for the last time clearing tables during the breakfast rush. For 12 years, the town of Millbrook told itself she ran off. But when new owner June Henley uncovers a sealed coffee pot hidden behind the counter, what's inside doesn't just reopen a cold case. It cracks the surface of a conspiracy protected by powerful men, and a secret they've been willing to kill to keep buried. June Henley didn't believe in ghosts, but the smell made her wonder. She'd inherited Mel's Diner 3 weeks earlier, part of a final drunken bet from a dying uncle she barely knew. "You always wanted to start over," he'd said, coughing blood into a napkin. "Start here." She hadn't said no. Now, just after closing on a sweltering Tuesday afternoon, she was alone with the ghosts. Cigarette smoke soaked into vinyl booths, sugar dispensers that stuck shut, the low hum of the walk-in cooler struggling against July. She moved like someone learning the shape of a memory, not their own. Behind the counter, buried under years of grime and good intentions, sat a stainless steel bun percolator. June hadn't touched it since moving in. Nobody had. It sat heavy on a warped shelf, too old to work, too solid to toss. She wasn't even sure why it bothered her now. Maybe it was the way Dolores Kim, the only waitress who stayed on after the sale, kept glancing at it when she thought no one noticed. Or how she avoided touching it during her cleanups, like the thing could burn her through its own dust. June wiped her palms and lifted it. It was heavier than it should have been. Inside, something shifted. Not the soft shuffle of leftover grounds or the hollow thunk of a loose filter. Something hard, dense, final. She set it on the counter. The lid was sealed tight with age and heat. Georgia humidity and time. She fetched a butter knife from the utensil bin and wedged it under the lip. The sound, when it popped open, wasn't loud, but it carried. A soft, brittle crack that echoed in her spine. Then the smell hit her. Not rotting, not fresh, just wrong. Metal and mildew. The scent of something that should have been buried, not stored. Inside was a hospital bracelet. Plastic, yellowed with age. Lettering still legible. Baby Girl Valdez, 08-15-87. June didn't move for a moment, didn't breathe. She knew the name. Everyone in Millbrook did. Cora Valdez, waitress at Mel's, 8 months pregnant, vanished during a morning shift in 1987. No witnesses, no goodbye, no body, just gone. People said she ran, couldn't handle being a single mother. Others whispered worse, that she saw something, and someone made sure she never saw anything again. That was Millbrook, where truth and myth hugged close, like lovers with shared secrets. June reached in, careful not to disturb anything else. Her fingers brushed something papery, folded, stiff with age. She pulled it out. A note, half torn, water-damaged, but legible in places. "They won't let me leave contraction started early if I don't make it. Basement." Her hand trembled. It was a confession, a warning, and she'd just opened a murder case. Then her phone rang. She flinched, almost dropping the note. Blocked number. She answered anyway. "Hello?" Silence. Then a soft click. The line went dead. She turned slowly toward the front windows. Outside, the street was empty. Heat shimmered off the pavement. But for just a second, she saw movement. The shadow of a figure stepping out of frame. Watching. June put the note and bracelet in a clean napkin and set them gently on the counter. Her hands were shaking now. This wasn't a story. This wasn't town lore. This was evidence. She pulled out her uncle's Rolodex from the office, the real kind, yellowed cards and handwritten notes, flipped past electricians and produce reps until she found it. Harold Breslin, Returned Date MPD, Cell 229-555-4127, underlined twice. A faded note next to it. Trust him. She called. 1 ring. 2. Then, Breslin. Mr. Breslin, this is June Henley. I own Mel's Diner now. I just found something. It's about Cora Valdez. Silence. Ma'am, I've heard every version of that ghost story. Unless you've got a time machine or a body, I have her hospital bracelet and a note in a sealed coffee pot that hasn't been touched since the 80s. Silence again, different this time, heavy. I'm on my way. He arrived 20 minutes later, tall, 65, maybe 70, still moved like a man who used to carry a badge. Gray hair but sharp eyes. He wore a pressed shirt, jeans, and the weariness of someone who'd spent years waiting for a truth no one believed. June handed him the napkin-wrapped evidence. He stared at the bracelet for a long time. Jesus, he said. Then again, quieter. Jesus. This means she didn't leave, June said. Right? She had the baby here. She was planning to leave, but she didn't. Means a lot of people are about to start lying harder than they have in years. He read the note, folded it, looked at the pot like it was a coffin. You said something about a basement? Yes. There's a locked door in the back. I've never had the key. Who might? Dolores. She's been here since before it happened. Breslin looked around the diner like it might answer back, like it might remember. We need to call this in. I did. I called you. I'm not with the department anymore, but this is real. He pulled out a newer phone. I'm calling Santos. Sheriff? He was a baby deputy when Cora disappeared. Now he's sheriff and running on a clean house campaign. If he's not in on it, he'll want to burn whoever is. Breslin stepped outside to make the call. June stayed by the counter. The percolator sat open beside her, a relic that had just cracked open the town's longest lie. She looked down at the bracelet again. Baby girl Valdez, 8/15/87. What had happened to the baby? And who in this town still remembered that day? Not as gossip, but as guilt. Sheriff Derek Santos didn't waste time. He pulled up in an unmarked cruiser with a crime scene tech in tow, younger than June expected. They entered the diner quietly, like it was a church after hours. Santos was in his early 40s, squared jaw and high-polished boots, a man trying to balance real justice with small-town diplomacy. His badge didn't glint so much as sit heavy on his chest, like it knew what was coming. Breslin did the introductions, then stepped back. June found the coffee pot, bracelet and note inside. Nothing's been moved. Santos nodded to his technician, a lanky man named Thomas, who began photographing everything. The pot, the napkin, even the streaks of corrosion inside the lid. June stood out of the way, but couldn't stop watching. Watching made it real. Santos squatted next to the counter where the evidence sat. He examined the bracelet through a sterile plastic sleeve. Valdez, born August 15th, 1987. That's the day she disappeared, right? Correct, Breslin said. 8 months pregnant. She went missing during the breakfast rush. No signs of struggle, no witnesses. I always thought someone cleaned it up too well. Santos turned to June. How'd you find it? I was cleaning. The thing's been there for decades. Something rattled inside. Thought it was trash. Then the smell hit me. He nodded slowly. And this note? He studied the paper, frowned. If I don't make it, basement. That's a specific place. Does this building have one? There's a locked door in the back, June said. I assumed it was utilities. I never had the key. Who does? Dolores Kim, maybe. She's worked here forever. She's off today. Santos rose. Show me the door." They moved as a group into the back corridor, past the dish pit and dry pantry. The hallway narrowed as it reached a corner few customers ever saw. There, behind an old chest freezer, stood a white wooden door with a newer deadbolt. It looked out of place, fresh hardware on aging trim. Santos bent to inspect the lock. "This was replaced recently." Breslin touched the frame. "Solid. Whoever secured this didn't want anyone stumbling in by accident." Santos stepped back. "We'll do it right. I'm not kicking in a door without cause. I'll call a locksmith." They returned to the front. Thomas continued photographing while Santos made the call. June paced, then stopped, eyes fixed on a smudge near the coffee pot's base. "You think Dolores knows?" she asked. Breslin didn't answer right away. "If she's had the key this whole time and this pot's been untouched for decades, she knows something." Santos hung up. "Locksmith's on his way. Name's Rick Langley. Quiet, discreet. He's helped us before." June crossed her arms. "If Dolores knew, why wouldn't she say anything? Why keep working here?" "Guilt," Breslin said. "Or fear. Or both. People convince themselves of all kinds of things when survival's involved." 10 minutes later, Langley arrived. Middle-aged, round glasses, soft voice. He didn't ask questions, just approached the basement door with his tools. The lock gave way with a gentle clack that sounded louder than it should have. Santos turned the knob. "Stay behind me." The stairs creaked as they descended into the dark. Thomas followed with a camera and a flashlight. June hesitated, then followed. The air grew cooler, damper, the smell of old wood and dust rising to meet them. When they reached the bottom, it was clear no one had been down here for a long time. The space was wide and unfinished. Concrete floor, exposed pipes, and forgotten boxes of napkins and expired ketchup packets. But one wall had a door, different from the rest. Metal, with a keypad lock now left ajar. Santos opened it. The room beyond wasn't a storage space. It was a repurposed medical setup, a hospital bed, worn but intact. Yellowed linens, a folding table with old surgical scissors, a calendar still tacked to the wall, turned to August 1987. The 15th was circled in red ink. June stepped inside and felt the temperature drop in her chest. Santos walked the perimeter. They set this up for a birth. Breslin approached the bed, eyes tracing the contours like reading a story in Braille. "This isn't a panic setup. Someone planned for a delivery down here. But why here?" "Because it was off the books," June whispered. "Unregistered, no hospital, no paperwork, no oversight." Thomas began photographing. Santos opened a small cabinet and pulled out a sealed Ziploc bag. Inside, a disposable camera. "Expired film," he said. "But worth checking. Maybe there's something on it." Breslin opened a drawer and found a small notebook, weathered, partially mold-stained. He flipped it open. "Cora's handwriting," he read aloud. "Trucks come Tuesday and Friday. Bobby says he has a plan. I can't trust William anymore. He's watching, even when I think he's not." June felt her legs go weak. She steadied herself on the metal bed frame. "She knew she was in danger," Breslin said. "She was documenting something. This wasn't just a scared girl. She was investigating." "Investigating what?" June asked. Santos pointed to another entry. "The money's in the wall. He hides it here during the handoff. I saw him. Red truck, same plates as last week. He didn't even eat." He exhaled slowly. "Drugs, trafficking, maybe money laundering, all run out of this diner." June looked around the small room. It wasn't just a secret. It was a crime scene. One that had waited nearly 4 decades to be found. Breslin lowered the notebook. They didn't kill her because she was pregnant. That was the cover story. They killed her because she found out what they were doing. "Who's Bobby?" June asked. Santos's expression darkened. Only Bobby I know who was close to Cora was Pastor Robert McKay, still runs the First Baptist. Is he still in Millbrook? Hasn't left since 1985. Breslin was already flipping through his phone. Then he's our next stop. Before they could leave, Santos's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, and froze. He looked up. That was dispatch. Dolores Kim just called. Said someone tried to break into her house. She thinks it's related to the diner. They all looked at each other. This wasn't just cold anymore. Someone knew the case had reopened, and someone was already trying to bury it again. Dolores Kim answered the door with a revolver in her hand and fear in her eyes. She was a tall woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled into a bun that used to mean business, but now just trembled with age. The gun shook slightly in her fingers, not from weakness, but from memory. Put it down, Dolores, Sheriff Santos said, stepping forward calmly. It's Derek. June's with me. No one's here to hurt you. She hesitated, eyes sweeping past them to the unmarked cruiser idling by the curb. Then she lowered the weapon slowly, carefully. You didn't see the man outside last night, she said, standing in my garden like he was remembering something. Breslin spoke gently. Someone from the old crew? Dolores didn't answer, just turned and led them inside. Her house was neat, obsessively so. A curated still life of doilies and old hymnals, antique clocks ticking in polite, nervous rhythm. She sat down hard on the edge of her couch, as if she'd been holding herself up since 1987. You opened the basement door, she said to June. Didn't think you'd find the key. I didn't. We called a locksmith. Dolores looked genuinely surprised. And the coffee pot? I was cleaning. Something was inside it. The bracelet. The note. Dolores closed her eyes. Her voice came out hoarse. I told him not to use that damn pot. Who? Santos asked. She looked at him flatly. You know who. William Caldwell. Your godfather. Silence stretched. Even Santos had no words for that. Dolores, Breslin said, you've been holding on to this for years. Why? Why stay here? Why not run? Her hands clenched in her lap. Because I raised him, the boy. I couldn't leave. He didn't ask for any of this. And he looks like her sometimes when he's quiet. June leaned forward. You knew Cora? Dolores gave a bitter laugh. Knew her better than anyone. Trained her. She worked the register her first year, then the floor. Smart girl. Not like the others. She asked questions. Too many. Breslin opened his notepad. Tell us about the night she disappeared. Dolores didn't speak for a moment. Then, she was in early. Said her back was hurting. I told her to go home, but she said no. Said she had something to do after shift. That she was meeting someone. Who? Santos asked. She wouldn't say, but I saw her talking to McKay 2 days before. In the booth by the jukebox. Serious voices. Low and hushed. Pastor McKay, June repeated. Cora trusted him? I think she wanted to, but Bobby... Dolores shook her head. He's always known how to make women think he's their salvation, even when he's the thing they need saving from. Santos stood. We're bringing him in. No, Breslin said. We go to him, at the church. He won't run. Not if he thinks he's still holding the cards. Dolores looked up. There's something else. Something I never told anyone. They turned to her. She gave me something. That day. An envelope. Said if anything happened to her, I should give it to someone I trust. Where is it? June asked. Dolores reached beneath the couch cushion. From the hollow between the springs, she pulled out a padded envelope, worn thin at the corners. Santos opened it carefully. Inside were 2 Polaroids, a cassette tape, and a folded sheet of paper. The photos showed the back of a red semi-truck parked behind the diner. One shot focused on the license plate. The second captured a man unloading boxes into the basement stairs, boxes marked with symbols June didn't recognize. "International narcotics codes," Santos said, pointing. "From the 80s. DEA used to log them." Breslin picked up the cassette. "What's on it?" Dolores closed her eyes. Cora taped a conversation between Caldwell and Bobby, arguing about the baby, about her, said she was going to the feds. June sat down. The weight of it all, photos, voices from the past, Dolores's years of silence, settled like smoke in her lungs. "This is enough to arrest him, isn't it?" Santos nodded. "Enough to detain. Maybe not convict, but it'll make him sweat." He turned to Dolores. "You did the right thing, keeping the boys safe, holding on to this." She looked down at her hands. "I don't want to die without telling him who he is." "You'll get that chance," Breslin said. "But first, we finish this." As they left, June looked back once. Dolores had returned to her couch, hands folded in her lap, staring at the space where the envelope had been. Not relieved, not even lighter, just resigned, like a woman who'd finally handed off the burden she never wanted to carry. They drove to the First Baptist Church of Millbrook as the afternoon sun tilted westward. A row of elderly volunteers was unloading canned goods for the food pantry as they pulled in. Pastor Robert McKay stood at the steps, sleeves rolled, offering instructions with the gentle authority of a man who knew how to appear kind. He smiled when he saw them. "Sheriff, Miss Henley, Detective." "We need a word, Pastor," Santos said. The smile faded, but McKay didn't flinch. "Of course. Office is this way." Inside, the air was cooler, tinted with incense and age. McKay sat behind his desk and gestured for them to sit. "I assume this is about Cora Valdez." Santos narrowed his eyes. "You assume correctly. I wondered when someone would come asking. It's been, 12 years? Breslin leaned forward. "You told her you'd help her escape." "I did." "But you didn't." McKay folded his hands. "No." "Why not?" McKay looked them over slowly, and something in his voice changed. Not arrogance, not defiance, just a tired man preparing to step into a long shadow. "Because I was too late." "You said you were too late," Breslin said, voice low, even. Pastor McKay nodded, his eyes fixed on the grain of his desk. "She was gone by the time I got there. Diner was locked. Lights off. I knocked for 10 minutes. Thought maybe she changed her mind, or that they'd gotten to her first." "You didn't go to the police?" June asked. McKay smiled. It wasn't kind. "The police? Who do you think I was trying to protect her from?" Santos flinched, but didn't argue. In 1987, his uncle Jorge Santos had been the acting sheriff, a man now remembered less for his public service than for dying mysteriously in a hunting accident 2 weeks after Cora disappeared. "Start from the beginning," Breslin said. "No skipping." McKay sat back. "Cora came to me in July, said she'd seen something in the basement, deliveries at night, boxes being moved in, then out again before dawn. She didn't know what was inside, but she had guesses, bad ones." "Drugs," Santos muttered. McKay nodded. "She said Caldwell was involved, that he used the diner as a drop point, claimed a few of the regulars, truckers, farmers, were in on it too. A logistics network right under everyone's noses." "And you believed her?" June asked. "She was scared, but clear-headed, determined. I believed her because she wasn't asking for attention. She was asking for help." "She also believed she was being followed," Breslin said. "There's a note." McKay's expression shifted. "Then she knew. They weren't subtle. Who? Santos asked. The sheriff, Caldwell, Morrison, a few others. Men who called themselves the safeguards. Said they kept the town clean by controlling what dirt came in and what went out. Breslin stared. You're saying it wasn't just Caldwell. I'm saying this town ran on two engines. What you saw and what you didn't. What the church blessed publicly and what the diner laundered privately. June felt like she was drowning. And you let it happen? I tried to stop it, quietly. Back then, you didn't make accusations like that unless you had proof. So I told Cora to document everything. Told her I'd help her get out when she had enough. We'd go to Atlanta, maybe the feds. But she never made it out, Santos said. McKay looked at them, and for the first time, June saw something crack in him. She called me the night she went missing, said she was going into labor, said she thought someone had found her notes. She left them with Dolores, June said, along with the tape. McKay's breath caught. She trusted her, even after everything. Everything? Breslin asked sharply. McKay's silence told them what they needed. June said it out loud. Dolores knew, maybe not all of it, but enough. She was a company woman, McKay said. Did what she was told until that night. You showed up after the call? Santos asked. I got there 30 minutes later, lights off, door unlocked, blood on the floor by the counter. I knew what that meant. I wanted to burn the place down. But you didn't call it in. What would I say? That I had a bad feeling? That the girl who went missing was 8 months pregnant with the secrets of the town's elite? McKay's face twisted. You don't call the devil to report its own sins. June stared at him. So you lied. At the vigil. At the town meetings. At every service where her mother begged you for answers. I lied because I was scared, McKay snapped. And because no one else was going to protect that baby if I didn't. The room fell into a tense hush. Then Santos leaned in, slow and deliberate. So here's what I need from you, Pastor. Names, records, every sermon, confession, meeting, whisper, envelope. You give me everything, and maybe we cut a deal on obstruction. I want protection, McKay said. You'll get it. Witness security if we have to. But if you withhold one name, just one, I'll personally make sure you spend your golden years sharing a bunk with the worst of them. McKay stared back, a war waging in his eyes. Finally, I'll give you Caldwell. And the others. He stood and walked to the old bookshelf behind his desk. Removed 2 leather-bound ledgers, thick with age. They weren't Bibles. He handed them over. They kept records, he said. Every shipment, every payoff. Who was bought, who was threatened. Breslin opened the first book and let out a low whistle. Jesus. Not here, McKay said. Not for a long time. They left the church with the ledgers, the weight of the truth dragging in their arms. Back in the car, June stared at the red brick building receding in the rear view. Why now? She asked. Why confess now? Santos shrugged. Maybe he's tired of pretending to be a good man. Or maybe, Breslin added, he knows the walls are finally closing in. They didn't go back to the station right away. Instead, they parked outside Mel's diner, the place where it started and, if the ledgers were to be believed, the place where everything had been coordinated for more than a decade. Hal Breslin laid the books flat on the counter, glancing around like he expected someone to burst in the moment he cracked them open. June locked the front door. No coffee, she said. But I've got whiskey. Hal didn't argue. Neither did Sheriff Santos. She poured 3 fingers into old, chipped mugs. Breslin opened the first ledger. The entries were written in an elegant, precise script. Dates, times, initials, locations, ledger style. No narrative, no emotion, just accounting. Like it was a business. Because it had been. Start here, Hal said, pointing to the top left. August 1987. The first entry, 8/10/87. DL rest from C, 40K. Diner, Route 12, 8/12/87. Midwife confirmed. Prep begun, 8/14/87. Cradle room stocked. Locks changed. M notified. Santos read it twice. DL is Dolores. C is Caldwell. Midwife, Dr. Morrison. And M is McKay, Breslin said. He's right. He didn't stop them. He was in on it until the very end. June felt sick. Cradle room. That's the basement. Santos flipped forward. These entries run through 1999. Weekly activity, most local. But here, look. 11/18/93. Guest from GFL. Diner cleared. 3 HRs. No contact. GFL? June asked. Georgia Freight and Logistics, Santos said. Used to be one of the biggest employers outside of Atlanta. Went under in '94 after a racketeering scandal. Half the board was indicted. Looks like they were already bleeding poison into Millbrook, Breslin muttered. Santos flipped pages slowly, running his finger down the columns. 1/9/94. JS asked questions. Handled. 2/13/94. C warns about B's retirement. Suggests grooming alt. JS? June said. Jorge Santos, the sheriff replied. My uncle. Handled means dead. Silence. It hung over them like a fog. June whispered, This book doesn't just track deals, it's a kill list. Breslin closed the ledger, fingers trembling. McKay knew what these were. He kept them anyway. Insurance, Santos said, in case someone like Caldwell ever turned on him. June went to the window. Outside, Millbrook looked like any other southern town at dusk. Mothers with strollers, kids on bikes, cars pulling into gas stations. But behind that calm was rot, years of it. Let's look at the second one, she said. This ledger was different, not as meticulous. More notes, more erratic handwriting, annotations, observations. It was a diary disguised as a ledger. At the front, a name was scribbled inside the cover. Property of E.J. Caldwell. His son? Santos asked. Breslin nodded. Williams' kid. Quiet, loner. Went to high school in town, then disappeared after graduation. June turned the first page. The tone was confessional. They think I don't know. But I saw her. I saw what they did. They think the basement swallows truth, but ghosts crawl upstairs eventually. She screamed for help. I heard her. I didn't move. A few pages later, they said she died in childbirth. But I saw her walk in. I saw her scream. Then silence. Morrison carried a box up the stairs. Caldwell didn't come out for a long time. Then he smiled at me like I'd joined the club. Santos murmured, He was there the night Cora died. This is witness testimony, Breslin said. Unreliable, maybe, but real. Further on, I watched Dolores rock the baby that wasn't hers. Said it was a gift from the Lord. Said God had forgiven the lies. I think she meant the ones they told her, not the ones she told herself. Jesus Christ, June whispered. He knew the whole time, and he documented it. The entries turned darker as the pages went on. He described rituals, late-night meetings in the woods outside town, oaths of silence, threats against anyone who tried to leave the fold. There were names, some familiar, some not. Brenner brought the box this time, said it was heavier than usual. No one asked questions. No one ever does. They drink, they pray, they bury the weight. Brenner, Santos repeated. That's Sheriff Brenner. He took over after Jorge died, and ran unopposed for 3 terms. Breslin added. The final entry was a scrawl. She never left. She never left. She's still here. The rest of the page was smeared with ink as if someone had written while crying or drunk or both. June flipped the next few pages. They were blank. No signature. No ending. Where is he? She asked. This son? Santos checked his phone. Last known address, Tifton County. But that was 10 years ago. No tax records. No social. Nothing since. He went underground, Breslin said. Or he ended up in one. We find him, we get the whole story, Santos replied. But June wasn't listening anymore. She was staring at a name at the bottom of the final filled page, E. Reeves. Same name from the school records. The boy. That was his name before Dolores changed it, June said. Cora named him Eli Reeves. Breslin closed the book. That boy's the last living link. And the only one who hasn't spoken yet, Santos said. If Caldwell or his crew find him first, they won't, June said, and the promise in her voice was absolute. Eli sat on the edge of his bed, arms wrapped around his knees, staring at a plastic toy dinosaur with chipped green paint. Dolores called it Benny the Brontosaurus, said it had been his favorite when he was small, said he used to carry it around like a security blanket. But Eli didn't remember that. In fact, he didn't remember much of anything before age 5, just a blur of light and voices and a woman's humming that stopped whenever the door opened. Lately, the dreams had returned. Not nightmares exactly, just moments that didn't feel like fiction. A pale woman in a white gown reaching out, her mouth moving without sound. Sometimes she bled. Sometimes she smiled. But always, she vanished. Dolores was in the kitchen, stirring something on the stove. From the hallway, Eli could hear her voice talking to someone on the phone, soft and urgent. No, I haven't told him. I'm waiting. He's just a boy. Pause. No, William doesn't know he remembers anything. Not yet. Eli strained to hear more, but the words became whispers. That name, William, he'd heard it twice this week. First from that man at school who claimed to be family. Then from the detective who pulled him aside afterward and asked questions that made his chest hurt. Do you know who your real mother is? Do you remember anything about the basement? Did Dolores ever talk about someone named Cora? Eli hadn't answered. Not because he didn't want to, but because the truth sat like a storm behind a glass wall in his head, too big to look at directly. The doorbell rang. Dolores moved quickly, too quickly for a woman her age, and Eli heard the deadbolt snap open. Then silence. No voices, just footsteps. Heavy ones. Eli stood up. Then he heard it, the unmistakable sound of struggle. A sharp thud, something metallic clattering across the kitchen tile. A muffled shout. He bolted into the hallway. Dolores was on the floor, dazed, blood trickling from her hairline. A man in a tan uniform, sheriff's badge on his chest, stood above her, holding a syringe. Don't make this harder than it needs to be, son, the man said. Eli turned and ran. The back door was chained, but he knew the way through the laundry room. He crashed into the side yard barefoot, heart slamming, his mind screaming that this wasn't just a break-in. This was a hunt. He didn't look back until he reached the street. The uniformed man stood at the window, watching, not chasing. Not yet. Because he didn't have to. Eli's face was known. His history was false. And anyone looking for a runaway child would believe whatever that badge told them. He needed help. But who? He remembered the name the detective gave him after school, scribbled on a napkin and stuffed into his backpack. June Henley, Mel's Diner. If something happens, find her. Eli ran. At the diner, June was mopping the floor when the bell over the door jingled, except the place was locked, closed for the day, and the front latch hadn't moved. She turned just in time to see Eli Reeves push open the emergency exit in the back, panting, barefoot, streaked with mud and sweat. "Jesus! Eli?" She rushed over. "They took her," he gasped. "Dolores. He had a badge, said he was a sheriff." June grabbed him, instinct more than thought. "You're okay. You're safe. Sit down." She reached for her phone and dialed. "Santos, he's here. The boy says Dolores was taken." Santos's voice sharpened instantly. "Is he hurt?" "No, but the guy who took her wore a badge." Santos swore under his breath. "Stay inside. Lock the doors. I'm 5 minutes out." June hung up and turned to Eli. "Did you recognize the man?" Eli nodded slowly. "He said his name was... He didn't say, but he looked at me like he already owned me." June's chest tightened. "Did he hurt you?" "No. He just said I needed to come with him, that I'd understand soon." June knelt to his eye level. "Eli, I'm going to tell you something very hard. You ready?" He nodded, but barely. "You're not who you think you are. Dolores loves you. She raised you. But your real mother's name was Cora Valdez. She worked here, in this diner, and 12 years ago she disappeared." Eli's eyes widened. "We think she was murdered, and we think she died trying to protect you." The boy said nothing for a long moment. Then, "The dreams aren't dreams, are they?" "No," June said softly. "They're memories." He looked toward the kitchen where the original coffee pot still sat on a shelf behind glass. "She's here," he whispered. "She is," June said, "and she's still protecting you." Santos arrived seconds later with 2 deputies. While they secured the perimeter, Hal Breslin slipped in through the alley door. He looked at Eli and stopped mid-step. "My God," he whispered. "He's the spitting image." Santos debriefed quickly. "We've got a man impersonating law enforcement, likely Caldwell's people. Dolores may still be alive, but time's running out. We need to move now." June looked at Eli. "You okay to come with us?" Eli squared his shoulders. "If I'm the key, I want to help unlock the door." Breslin nodded. "We've got one last name in the ledger, one that's circled, Southfield Farm, WC. Caldwell's birthplace," Santos said. "Abandoned in the 90s, family estate, no utilities, nothing on county records for years." "Let's go," June said. And with that they moved, toward the place where it all began, and where, one way or another, it would all end. Southfield Farm stood at the edge of Millbrook's forgotten land, past the churchyards and logging roads, past the derelict gas station that hadn't sold a gallon since Clinton's first term. For years it was just a name on yellowed deeds, its past buried deeper than any of its wells. Now it was a destination. The one place William Caldwell had never mentioned in his official biography. Not because it didn't matter, because it mattered too much. The gravel path leading to the farmhouse crunched under the tires of Sheriff Santos's SUV as they crept past the tree line. Behind them, June Henley sat with Eli, the boy staring straight ahead, face pale but jaw clenched tight. Hal Breslin rode shotgun, thumbing through the last pages of Cora's recovered journal like it might still hold a final clue. The farmhouse emerged from the darkness like a bruise. Faded white siding warped from moisture, windows boarded from the inside. No vehicles, no lights. But Hal's eyes narrowed. "Third floor window, right there. Someone moved." "Infrared shows a heat signature," Santos muttered, checking the dash monitor. "2 bodies. Could be more underground." "No cell signal," June noted, glancing at her phone. "You sure your guys are en route?" They're coming. State troopers and FBI backup within 10. We go in now, we go quiet and smart. Hal cracked the door. This place, it was in the original arrest files. Caldwell's parents died in this house. Murder-suicide, 1972. William was 13. It was buried in a supplemental report nobody bothered to read. June nodded slowly. You think the pathology started here? I think it never left. They exited the car in silence, weapons drawn, flashlights off. The moon was just bright enough to navigate by, casting the house in stark contrast. As they neared the porch, the air thickened, humid, expectant. Eli stayed close to June, his hand brushing hers as they climbed the sagging steps. Santos reached the door first. It was unlocked. They entered a long hallway lined with peeling wallpaper and photographs turned face down. The air inside smelled like mildew, copper, and something older, something sweet and rotten. A voice echoed from the basement. You brought the boy. Of course you did. It was Caldwell. June's stomach turned. That voice had haunted their investigation like smoke under a door, always near, never caught. Now it sounded tired. Not afraid, resolved. I figured it'd end here, he called again. Back where it all started. They descended the stairs slowly, each creak of the wood a warning. The basement was lit by a single floodlight clamped to an exposed beam. At its center sat a makeshift chair. Dolores tied to it, blood dried along her temple, breathing shallow. Standing beside her, holding a revolver loosely, was William Caldwell. His sheriff's badge was gone. His button-up shirt was open at the collar, sleeves rolled back, and his eyes, once precise, had the distant glint of a man unmoored. Eli froze at the bottom step. Caldwell saw him and smiled. You're taller than she was, and braver. She never looked me in the eye after the decision was made. Let her go, June said evenly, stepping in front of Eli. No. Because you're not here for her. Not really. You're here for closure, justice, a tidy ending, the confession, the arrest, the bow-tied moral victory. He laughed softly. You know what this place is? Hal stepped forward. Where the fantasy ended and the damage began. Caldwell nodded. My father beat my mother with a hammer. She shot him in the chest while I was upstairs doing math homework. I was the one who called it in. The dispatcher asked if there was blood. I said, yes, but most of it's inside jars. She thought I was hallucinating, but he kept trophies, just like I do now. June's face paled. Are you admitting? I'm telling you this house never let go. Every person I buried in this county, I imagined them here first. In this basement. Cora, most of all. He pointed the gun, not at them, but at the ground, tapping the cement lightly with the barrel. She died right here, after the baby came. Morrison said I should let her rest, that the child wouldn't cry for a while. But she looked up at me and said one thing. Not, please, not, why. She said, make it worth something. You didn't, Hal said. No, Caldwell whispered. I didn't. Dolores stirred slightly, eyes fluttering open. Eli? The boy stepped forward now, past June's reaching hand. I'm here. Caldwell's hand didn't move. You were the one thing I couldn't calculate. You survived, grew, became a story. Let her go, Eli said. You don't need her anymore. You're right, Caldwell said. Then he tossed the gun to the floor. The sound startled everyone, but he raised his hands, empty. She's yours. Santos rushed forward, cutting Dolores free, checking her pulse. June went to Eli, pulling him back. Hal watched Caldwell with unblinking eyes. You want me arrested? Caldwell said. That's fine, but just know, This town loved me, still does. The funeral will be huge." "We're not giving you a funeral," Santos said grimly. "We're giving you a trial." As the sirens approached in the distance, flooding the forest with red and blue, William Caldwell knelt on the floor and smiled. "You think this ends with me?" he asked. "You think the rot doesn't run deeper?" But no one answered him, because even in the silence, they knew. He was right, and the reckoning had only begun. The farmhouse was still surrounded by state vehicles at dawn. Floodlights threw the clapboard exterior into harsh relief, and evidence techs moved like ghosts from room to room. The kind of cleanup that follows a slow-motion disaster. Methodical, hushed, surgical. June stood by the trunk of a pine tree, watching Dolores Kim sip weak hospital coffee from a paper cup. The older woman's face was bruised but steady, her eyes sharper than June remembered. Whatever Dolores had endured in that basement, it hadn't broken her. If anything, it had pulled her further upright. "They'll put him away, won't they?" Dolores asked quietly. "Yes," June said, "but we're not done." Dolores nodded. "You won't be. Not for a while." Across the clearing, Hal stood with Santos, reviewing a digital printout. The farmhouse ledger, handwritten, coded, and kept in a drawer beneath the kitchen floorboards. It had been the one thing Caldwell left behind without trying to burn. Santos pointed to a name and whistled low. "That's a sitting county judge." "And 3 city councilmen," Hal added. "Cora wasn't wrong. This thing stretched everywhere." The ledger was meticulous. Dates, initials, routes, quantities. Deliveries disguised as church donations. Children's clothes packed with fentanyl. Money cleaned through ghost nonprofits registered to P.O. boxes in abandoned towns. The operation wasn't just a front. It had roots, branches, a canopy of influence that shaded the whole county. They would need more than arrests. They'd need a reckoning. Santos closed the file. "We've got enough here to shut down the local government twice over, but it won't matter if people don't believe it." June stepped forward. "Then make them believe it." Santos raised an eyebrow. "Hold a press conference," she said. "Downtown. Use the ledger. Use McKay's confession. Cora's journal. Publish everything. Let people see." "Transparency," Hal said. "Public record. Make it too big to bury." "Too public to erase," Santos murmured. "Exactly," June said. They agreed to set it for Friday. 4 days. Enough time to gather evidence, secure the remaining names, and make sure no one else vanished before justice reached them. Back at the station, Eli sat in the break room, knees to chest, Dolores beside him. The boy was silent, processing layers of grief and betrayal that had been waiting his whole life to surface. June crouched beside him. "You're safe now," she said softly. "But if you want, we can find someone for you to talk to." "I want to go to the quarry," Eli said suddenly. Dolores flinched. "Baby!" "I need to see it, where she died." June looked at Dolores, then back at the boy. "We'll go," she said. That afternoon they returned to Miller's quarry. It was quiet now, abandoned again, but irrevocably changed. Yellow tape fluttered in the wind, marking places where blood had dried and memories had surfaced like bones in the frost. Eli walked to the edge of the pit, where the water glistened dark green and stood still. June let him have his silence. After a minute, he spoke. "I always had nightmares about water. Didn't know why. Guess this is why." "It's not your fault," she said. "I know, but I still feel it." "You'll feel it for a long time. But you'll also outgrow the parts that hurt the most. Not because they stop being painful, but because you'll become someone strong enough to carry them." Eli looked at her. Did you lose your mom, too? June hesitated. Not like you did, but I lost her all the same. He nodded once, as if that was enough. They stood in silence together until the wind shifted and carried the scent of pine across the water. Somewhere, a hawk called. The past didn't leave. It lived in the corners. But now, they had light. Back in Millbrook, the diner reopened that Thursday. Not for business, just for memory. June hung a photo of Cora above the counter, 22, smiling, hair pulled back, name tag slightly crooked. A second photo showed Eli at 12, standing beside her grave with a rose in hand. The town came. Quiet at first, then in waves. Some cried. Some brought flowers. Some just stood and looked at the photos, then left without a word. But no one denied her anymore. Cora Valdez was no longer missing. She was real. And she mattered. Friday arrived, the courthouse lawn filled with reporters and townspeople. Hal and Santos took the podium together. Behind them, a corkboard covered in names, photos, and arrows showed the full scope of the Caldwell conspiracy. Cora's name sat at the center. Santos held up the journal. She wrote everything down, because she knew we might forget. He held up the ledger. He wrote everything down, because he believed he was untouchable. Then Hal stepped forward. We believed Cora Valdez ran away. We believed William Caldwell was a hero. We believed wrong. He paused. But belief doesn't make something true. Evidence does. Flashbulbs went off, reporters scribbled, and somewhere in the back of the crowd, June saw Amanda Morrison, arms folded, eyes fierce. The truth had arrived, and it wasn't going anywhere. The courthouse press conference did what June hoped. It split Millbrook down the middle. Half the town rallied around Cora's name. The other half murmured about disruption, about outsiders stirring up old wounds. But no one could unsee the corkboard. No one could pretend the journal hadn't existed, or the ledger, or the photographs of Cora's makeshift hospital room under the diner. But justice has gravity, and gravity draws shadows. 2 nights after the press conference, a fire broke out at the First Baptist Church of Millbrook. The building was empty, but the sanctuary went up fast. Pews blackened to charcoal. Stained glass liquefied into ribbons. The choir loft collapsed under the weight of its own ash. Investigators found no sign of accident, no faulty wiring, no lightning strike. But what they did find was telling. Gas canisters in the furnace room, and a scorched ledger burned halfway through. Inside, someone had written a name over and over again. Eli Reeves. Eli Reeves. Eli Reeves. The implication was clear. Not everyone wanted the past exposed, and some were willing to burn what couldn't be buried. Santos called June just before dawn. You need to come down here, he said. Is Eli? He's fine, but I want you here when we open the time capsule. She blinked, groggy. The what? During renovations in 1990, the church buried a time capsule under the choir stand. We found it in the wreckage. It wasn't supposed to be opened until 2020. Guess we're a few years late. At the church, the ruins still smoked. The capsule, a rusting steel box the size of a cooler, sat on a folding table surrounded by scorched hymnals. June, Santos, and Hal gathered around as a tech used bolt cutters to slice the lock. Inside, photos, newspapers, a church bulletin from 1990, and a sealed manila envelope labeled in looping cursive, "To be opened by the righteous when the time comes." Santos broke the seal. Inside were 2 things, a cassette tape and a letter. Hal took the letter. June took the tape. Let's play it, she said. They found an old tape deck in the evidence room. As the reel turned, a voice came on, trembling, male, familiar. If you're hearing this, Then the Lord saw fit to expose what I never had the courage to say aloud. My name is Reverend Robert McKay, and I was a coward. They listened as McKay recounted everything. Caldwell's rise, the laundering through church projects, the fake missionaries, the real drugs. He named names, documented drop locations, even confessed his role in luring Cora into the basement that final day. I told myself it was mercy, that she'd be better off disappearing quietly. But the truth is, I was protecting the wrong people. The tape ended with silence, then the scrape of a chair. May God forgive me. When it clicked off, no one spoke for a long time. Hal finally said, That tape seals it. Caldwell's case is bulletproof now. June stared at the melted choir loft. Why bury this? McKay knew the church was dirty. He also knew it had power, and he wasn't brave enough to burn it down. So he left a fuse in the ground, just hoped someone would light it later. They brought the letter to Amanda Morrison. She confirmed the handwriting. He was always writing sermons he never preached, she said. I guess this was the one that mattered. The FBI reclassified the investigation from a county-level drug ring to a regional corruption task force. Federal prosecutors descended on Millbrook with mandates and subpoenas. The mayor resigned. 3 sheriff's deputies were arrested for tampering with evidence in 1987. A retired county coroner was brought in for questioning, then fled the state and turned himself in 2 days later in Knoxville. But with every name that fell, a new silence emerged. A network this old didn't operate without backup plans. Caldwell was in custody, but he'd built redundancies, safety nets, and it was clear he hadn't been the top of the pyramid. That came clearer when Santos got a letter in the mail, hand-delivered by a courier with no return address. Inside, a single typed sentence. Caldwell wasn't our bishop. He was just the usher. June read it twice. What the hell does that mean? She asked. Hal rubbed his chin. It means we're looking at the wrong altar. They reviewed everything again. The deliveries, the storage units, the laundering. A second layer emerged. Businesses connected not to the church but to the school board. Contracts awarded with no oversight. Warehouse leases signed by shell corporations using district funds. One address showed up again and again. A trucking depot on Highway 37, now long abandoned. June, Santos, and Hal drove out together. The depot had weeds growing through the asphalt and a rusted gate chained shut. But the lock was clean, recent, and inside the office a fresh coffee cup sat next to a clipboard of manifests. The most recent, Youth Outreach Shipment, Destination, Midland County. The name on the paperwork? Evergreen Alliance Foundation. Santos made a call. FBI records showed Evergreen had never filed a single tax return. They had a new front, and it was still active. June felt her stomach drop. How deep does this go? Hal didn't answer. He looked at Eli, who was sitting in the back seat of the cruiser, eyes narrowed, processing. The boy asked, If Caldwell was just the usher, who's the pastor? No one answered, but June knew one thing. This wasn't over. The Evergreen Alliance Foundation existed only on paper. No office, no phone number, no website. Just a handful of freight manifests, grant proposals, and tax IDs routed through different states. The foundation had been awarded nearly $4.2 million in state educational contracts over 6 years. Not a cent had been audited. Not one child could be found who'd ever received the services it promised. It was a phantom. A laundering system disguised as community outreach. And someone was still running it. Santos assigned 2 deputies to follow the paper trail while he met June and Hal at the Millbrook Historical Society, where the archived city council minutes were stored on microfiche. It's always the boring stuff, June muttered, squinting at the screen. Contracts, rezoning, budget line items? Boring hides better, Hal replied. Criminals don't wear ski masks anymore. They wear accountant smiles. That's when June spotted the name, tucked between an application for a new cell phone tower and a minor water treatment grant. J.L. Abram, consultant, Evergreen Alliance. J.L. Abram, she said aloud. That name's familiar. Hal froze. Judge Lester Abram? Retired? Supposedly. They pulled the court roster from 1987. There he was, presiding judge over the Valdez missing persons case, the one who sealed the file 3 weeks after Cora vanished, citing ongoing local safety concerns. June felt the air change. He didn't just cover for Caldwell. He organized the silence. Hal nodded slowly. And if he ran the courthouse, he ran the records, which means every dead lead, every missing file, started at his desk. They brought the evidence to Agent Chen, who took it like a live grenade. We've been watching him for months, she admitted, but without a clear link to the trafficking network, we couldn't move. Your documents change that. And? Santos asked. Chen didn't hesitate. We arrest him. Tonight. But that wouldn't be easy. Abram lived in a gated estate 30 miles north, in a house flanked by private security and legal insulation. A midnight knock would tip off the people he worked for, whoever they were. What they needed was undeniable evidence. Proof no grand jury could ignore. Which meant they had to confront him. June was against it. He'll lie, or stall, or die of a heart attack right before he confesses. But Hal disagreed. He's a chess player. What you do with people like him is flip the board. That night, Hal and June walked into Abram's study. It was all leather-bound books, mounted diplomas, and bourbon in cut glass. Abram, now in his 80s, wore a cardigan-like armor and smiled like a cobra. I had a feeling you'd come, he said, motioning for them to sit. Hal placed Cora's journal on the desk between them. Abram didn't touch it, but his eyes flicked over the cover like someone revisiting an old wound. I assume you've read it, Hal said. I've read parts of it. What about the ledger? The photos? Artifacts, taken out of context. You sealed her case. I sealed a fire that could have burned down this town. You think you're the first to come knocking, Harold? We had whispers, rumors, but no one ever brought proof, until now. June said, You used Evergreen to keep the network alive. After Caldwell, after the church burned. You just changed names. He didn't answer, which was answer enough. Why? She asked. You're not poor. You're not desperate. Why keep it going? Abram sipped his bourbon. Because it was bigger than her. Bigger than any one of us. What Cora saw, what she died for, was just a crack in the stained glass. She didn't understand what held the window up. Hal leaned in. Then explain it. What are we really dealing with? Abram finally touched the journal. He opened it to the last page. She wasn't the first. You know that now, don't you? There were others before her. Girls who asked too many questions. Drivers who got cold feet. Even a nurse. The moment someone tries to pull back the curtain, we call it mental instability, domestic trouble, cold feet. Did you kill them? No, I just wrote the rules. He looked at June. You think exposing me will end this? It won't. You take me down, 10 others rise. I didn't build the house, I just made sure the roof didn't leak. But he underestimated how tired people were of water-stained ceilings. Hal tapped the microphone in his breast pocket. We got all of that. Recorded. Abram froze. And we transmitted it to Agent Chen 10 minutes ago, June added. The former judge's mouth twitched. That was a mistake, he said. Then we've made the right one, June replied. They stood. As they walked out, Abram said something that followed them down the hallway. Truth is a fire. It doesn't warm. It consumes. Outside, Santos was waiting with a warrant and 4 federal agents. Abram stepped out in his slippers, hands raised. As he passed June, he leaned in and whispered, "Tell Eli his mother was brave, but bravery doesn't bury monsters. Power does." June didn't flinch. She said nothing, but in her pocket, she held a folded paper. Cora's last entry. The courtroom was packed, not with press, those would come later, but with townspeople, church elders, grocery clerks, retired truckers, and the waitress who once trained Cora on her first day. They didn't say a word when William Abram Caldwell was let in, shackled and stone-faced. He didn't meet their eyes. Maybe he'd stopped trying to pretend. Or maybe he still thought this was a misunderstanding that could be outmaneuvered. June watched from the back row, seated between Hal and Dolores. Her fingers gripped the edge of the bench as if letting go would mean floating off the earth. Eli sat 2 rows ahead, flanked by agents and a trauma counselor. He didn't fidget, didn't look back, just stared at the man who'd taken his mother's life and shaped the lie he'd grown up in. Hal leaned in, whispering, "He's not pleading guilty." June nodded. "Doesn't matter. The evidence is a freight train." She was right. Amanda Morrison had handed the FBI everything. Ledgers, photos, tapes. More than enough to map the operation across 3 counties in 15 years. Between that and Pastor McKay's confession, Caldwell's empire had collapsed in under 72 hours. Still, the trial was set to proceed. Caldwell's lawyers argued coercion, necessity, even community service. "We kept this town alive," they said. "He prevented worse." But the people weren't buying it. Not anymore. Not with the ledger showing payments to medical examiners, judges, and deputies. Not with the photos of the basement. Not with the coffee pot that started it all, now locked in an evidence locker in Atlanta. Outside, the sun was breaking through the late winter gray. Dolores squinted against it as they stepped onto the courthouse steps. "I didn't think I'd live to see this," she said. "Cora's name in public without shame." "She deserves that much," June said. "At least that much." A van pulled up to the curb. Federal seal on the door. Inside were 2 agents waiting to take Dolores and Eli to protective housing until the trial concluded. It wasn't safe in Millbrook. Too many loose threads. Eli turned to June. "Will you still be at the diner when I get back?" "Always," she said. "Someone's got to serve honest coffee in this town." He cracked a smile. First real one in days. That night, June reopened Mel's Diner. Not to customers, she wasn't ready for that, but to clean, to wipe away the years of silence, the whispered meetings, the men who thought no one was watching. She scrubbed the counter where Cora used to stand, replaced the coffee pot with a new one. Sleek, stainless steel, incapable of holding blood and secrets. Hal showed up around midnight with takeout and a bottle of something strong. "Thought we should toast," he said. "To what?" "To the dead, and the ones who didn't stay that way." They sat in silence for a while, watching the neon flicker against the window. "You ever think we missed something?" June asked. "Some sign? Some way we could have stopped it sooner?" "Every day," Hal said. "But guilt's a luxury. You did more than anyone ever did. Cora would have been proud." By spring, the town had changed. Some said it was quieter. Others said it was louder, now that the silences were broken. The Tuesday morning coffee club no longer met. 2 members had been indicted. 1 had vanished. The rest stayed home or found new places to pretend. But new faces came in, curious, cautious, hungry. Some asked about the story. June didn't always tell it. Some just wanted eggs and peace. But occasionally, someone would sit at the counter and say, "I heard this place stood up to something ugly." And June would pour them coffee and say, "Yeah, it did." Cora's funeral was held in April. The coroner confirmed the remains found at the quarry were hers. DNA matched. The injuries told the rest of the story: blunt force, defensive wounds, postnatal trauma. She'd fought. Even weakened, she'd fought. The service was small. June read the eulogy. Hal wore his badge for the first time in years. Eli placed a daffodil on the coffin and whispered something no one else could hear. Afterward, June found him by the grave. "You okay?" she asked. "Not really," he said, "but I will be." She wrapped an arm around his shoulder. "That's enough for now." The trial lasted 4 weeks. Caldwell didn't testify. His lawyers threw every distraction they could muster: logistics, regional economics, even patriotism. The jury returned a verdict in 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Life without parole. The courtroom was quiet when the sentence was read. No cheering, just relief. Like air returning to a room that had been held too tight for too long. Years later, people would write books about the case. Journalists would argue over how far the corruption reached. The FBI would use it as a training model. But for June, it wasn't about systems. It was about one girl, one waitress, one life that mattered. She kept the photo of Cora by the register. Just her and a notepad, laughing at something off camera. Customers would sometimes ask, "Is that you?" And June would shake her head. "That's the girl who tried to save us. We just didn't listen in time." One night, long after closing, June was wiping down the counter when she heard the door chime. She looked up, expecting Hal or Dolores, but it was Eli, older now, taller, sharper around the eyes. He dropped his backpack on a stool and grinned. "I got into UGA." "That's so. Journalism. I want to tell stories that don't get buried." June poured him a cup. "Your mom would have liked that." "I hope so," he said. Then he pulled something from his bag, a worn hospital bracelet. "You kept it?" "It's hers," he said. "It should stay here, where she was last alive." June took it carefully, placed it beneath the counter. "We'll keep it safe." They sat in silence, the way survivors do. No need to fill it, no need to fix it. Just knowing they'd lived through the worst and still showed up was enough.